I was already in a foul mood when I boarded the plane. A 3-hour delay, a crammed terminal, and a lukewarm coffee had set the tone for the day. All I wanted was to sink into my first-class seat and leave the chaos behind. But as I approached my row, I stopped in my tracks. Sitting next to my assigned seat was a guy who looked completely out of place. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt, a pair of worn jeans, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. He looked more like someone you'd find in coach or the airport lounge bathroom than in first class. I sat down and couldn't help but mutter under my breath, "Why do they let just anyone in first class these days?" I wasn't even sure if he heard me. He just glanced my way and smiled, calm, polite, and infuriatingly unaffected. I figured he might be one of those influencers or someone who got bumped up by sheer luck. Either way, he didn't belong here, not with that casual attitude and scruffy appearance. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspirational stories, or please complete our 1,000 subscribers. As I settled in, I glanced over again, trying to figure him out. He had this strange calm about him, like he wasn't fazed by anything. It annoyed me even more. Who comes into first class looking like that and then has the nerve to act like they own the place? I told myself I wouldn't let it bother me, but something about him kept pulling my attention. I had no idea what I was in for. That unassuming man with the soft smile and quiet demeanor was about to completely upend everything I thought I knew about status, success, and appearances. I just didn't see it coming. Look, I've worked hard to get where I am today. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. Everything I have, my business, my connections, my lifestyle, I earned it. Blood, sweat, and tears, as they say. That's why I take pride in the life I've built. First-class flights, fine dining, exclusive events. These things aren't just perks to me. They're reminders of how far I've come. They're a part of the world I've worked my way into, a world of people who understand what it takes to get here. So when I see someone who doesn't fit the mold, like that guy sitting next to me on the plane, I can't help but question it. I mean, here I am, suited up even for a flight, because that's what professionals do. And then there's this guy, sitting in jeans and a t-shirt, looking like he just walked out of a coffee shop. It just doesn't add up. My first thought, maybe he got lucky, won the lottery, or got a last-minute upgrade. You see it sometimes, people who don't really belong in this kind of setting but find themselves here by chance. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be mean. It's just, when you've worked this hard to climb the ladder, you notice when someone looks like they skipped a few rungs. And this guy? He didn't just skip the rungs. He didn't even seem to care about the ladder. He wasn't trying to fit in, wasn't trying to prove himself. That's what threw me off. If I'm being honest, it irked me. I couldn't understand it. But then again, at that moment, I didn't understand a lot about him, or myself, for that matter. I'll admit, I can be a bit sharp-tongued when I'm irritated. And that day, I was already annoyed before I even sat down. So, when I tossed a few subtle digs at the guy sitting next to me, nothing too harsh, just enough to make a point, I fully expected some kind of reaction. A glare, a sarcastic comment, maybe even a defensive comeback. But this guy? Nothing. Not a flicker of annoyance. He just sat there, calm as could be, like he hadn't even noticed. And then, out of nowhere, he turns to me and says, "Hi, I'm Keanu. Nice to meet you." Just like that. Friendly, polite, like we were old friends or something. It threw me off for a second. I didn't even respond right away. I was too busy processing his tone. It wasn't forced or fake either. It was genuinely kind, and that made it worse somehow. Because here's the thing. When someone's that calm, that unbothered, it can feel smug, like they're too above it all to even care. That's how it felt to me anyway. I mean, I'm here, suited up, carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, and he's just sitting there like life's one big yoga retreat. It was irritating, to say the least. I started convincing myself that his composure was arrogance, that he thought he was better than me. But deep down, I think it was something else that bothered me, something I couldn't quite put my finger on at the time. That calmness of his? It wasn't arrogance at all. It was confidence, the kind that doesn't need to be loud. And if I'm honest, it unnerved me more than I wanted to admit. By the time the delay announcement came through, I'd hit my breaking point. Another hour stuck on the tarmac? It was like the universe was just piling on at this point. And to make matters worse, there he was, Keanu, sitting next to me, as calm as ever. Not a care in the world. While I was fuming, he was just there, leaning back in his seat, like we weren't all stuck in this miserable situation together. It was infuriating. I kept stealing glances at him, waiting for some sign that he was as annoyed as the rest of us. But nope. No sighs, no complaints, no checking the time obsessively like a normal person. Nothing. It was like he was in his own little bubble, completely unaffected. And for some reason, that made my blood boil even more. So, before I even thought it through, I said it, loud enough for him and everyone else in earshot to hear. Some people think money can buy them class, but it clearly can't. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't nice. But at that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to get a reaction, to crack that infuriating calm of his. The cabin went quiet for a second. I could feel the other passengers turning to look. Some of them were probably shocked, others just curious about the drama unfolding in row 2A. And him? He turned to me, met my eyes, and gave me this small, understanding smile. Not sarcastic, not defensive, just patient. Then he said, "I'm sorry you're having a rough day. I hope things get better for you." That threw me completely off balance. No anger, no snark, just pure kindness. It was like trying to punch a cloud. And in that moment, with all the eyes on me, I felt something I wasn't used to feeling. Embarrassed. Not because of what he said, but because of how small I'd just made myself look. When I made that comment about class, I expected some kind of reaction. Maybe a glare or a snarky comeback. At the very least, I thought he'd get defensive. That would have made sense, right? But no. This guy, Keanu, didn't take the bait. Instead, he turned to me with this calm, almost understanding expression and said, "Everyone has their own struggles. I hope your day gets better." I couldn't believe it. That's all he said. No anger, no sarcasm, just grace. Pure, unshakable grace. And the worst part? It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. His tone wasn't patronizing or fake, it was genuine. Like he really meant it. Like he actually cared. For a split second, I could feel the tension in the cabin ease. A few of the other passengers even looked impressed. Some nodded, like they admired his calm response. Me? I hated it. Not because it was rude, it wasn't. Not because it was wrong, it wasn't that either. I hated it because it was so completely unexpected, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Here I was, fuming, ready for a fight, and he just diffused the whole situation with one sentence. And somehow, that made me angrier. Who does that? Who stays that calm and composed after being insulted? It felt almost unfair, like he was playing by a different set of rules. And as much as I hate to admit it, his words stuck with me. Everyone has their own struggles. He said it like he knew something I didn't. like he'd been through things I couldn't even imagine. It wasn't just a response, it was a reminder. A reminder that maybe, just maybe, I was the one who needed to take a step back and think about how I was acting. But at the time, I wasn't ready to hear it. Instead, I let it fuel my frustration even more. I was just starting to settle into the flight, trying to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind about Keanu's calm response. And then, the flight attendant came over, a little too eager for my taste. She leaned in with a polite smile and said, "Just to let you know, sir, Mr. Reeves has graciously covered your drink order." For a second, I couldn't process it. Covered my drink? That was ridiculous. Why would he do that after everything I said? I had insulted the guy, called him out in front of the whole cabin, and he responds by picking up my tab? It didn't make sense. It made me uneasy, like I was on the edge of a conversation I wasn't prepared to have. I could feel my face getting hot. A part of me wanted to thank him, maybe even apologize for being a jerk. But the pride in me wouldn't let me. I wasn't going to look weak or like I was giving in. He might have been all calm and polite, but I wasn't about to show any cracks in my armor. So I did what anyone would do. I masked it. I smiled, nodded, and told the flight attendant, "No need for that, but thanks." Inside, though, I was all over the place. What kind of person does that? Here I was, getting angrier by the minute, and he just kept being kind. It wasn't a big gesture, but the fact that he did it after I'd just insulted him? That threw me off. I wanted to hate him for it, for making me feel like a fool. But I couldn't. I tried to brush it off, but the seed of discomfort had already been planted. Why was he so gracious? Why didn't he just let me have it? It was like he knew something I didn't. Or maybe, just maybe, he was better than me in ways I hadn't yet figured out. I was just trying to keep my thoughts in check when it happened. A few rows up, I noticed a woman stand up, looking nervous but determined. She hesitated for a moment before making her way down the aisle, her eyes darting back and forth. I didn't think much of it at first. People get nervous in the presence of celebrities all the time. But then I saw her walk straight toward Keanu. That's when I scoffed, assuming it was just another case of mistaken identity. I mean, who could blame her? The guy was wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans, nothing flashy. He didn't exactly scream A-list celebrity. I figured she must have confused him for someone else, maybe a small-time social media influencer or a local actor. It happens, right? The woman was getting closer, and I could see her shaking a little. My irritation flared again. She was probably going to ask for a selfie or some silly autograph, and I'd have to witness the whole thing. Great. But then something caught my attention. She stopped in front of him, looked at him for a second like she was trying to convince herself, and then asked, "Excuse me, are you Keanu Reeves?" Her voice was shaky, like she couldn't quite believe she was standing in front of him. Keanu, without hesitation, smiled and nodded. "I am," he said, his voice warm and kind. I was still convinced this was a mistake, but the look on her face said it all. She wasn't just some fan hoping for an autograph from any random person. This was genuine. And then he did something I wasn't expecting. He agreed to sign her ticket. It wasn't just a quick scribble either. He took his time, chatted with her for a moment, and even made her laugh. I watched the whole thing, and despite myself, I couldn't help but be a little impressed. She was starstruck, sure, but Keanu wasn't treating her like an admirer. He was treating her like a person. Something about that just clicked, even if I didn't fully understand it. The turbulence hit just after the seatbelt sign turned on, and the plane started shaking a little. It wasn't the worst I'd ever experienced, but it was enough to make the atmosphere tense. Most people were clutching their armrests, eyes wide. And of course, there was Keanu, sitting there as cool as ever, totally unfazed by the bumps in the sky. I could hear the soft hum of his voice as he leaned toward me, trying to strike up a conversation, of all things. "Funny, isn't it?" he said, his tone easy and relaxed. "How a little turbulence can throw everything off balance. Makes you realize how much we take our stability for granted." I looked at him, annoyed. What was he trying to do now? I had enough on my plate with my own thoughts rattling around in my head, and now he was going to play philosopher. I didn't need some random guy giving me a life lesson, especially not in a moment like this, but he kept going, like he genuinely wanted to talk. "I've noticed," he continued, "that sometimes it takes a little shake-up to remind us of what matters most. Success, wealth, status, they don't mean much if you're not grounded." I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to hear about his spiritual enlightenment or whatever motivational speech he was about to deliver. Maybe he thought I was some lost soul, but I wasn't buying it. "Save it for your motivational YouTube channel," I shot back, trying to brush him off. I gave a half smirk, hoping that would end the conversation. Some of us are just here to get from point A to point B without all the feel-good talk. He didn't flinch, not even a little. He just nodded, almost like he expected it. "Fair enough," he said quietly, but there was something in his eyes, something that made me feel like I had missed the point entirely. And as much as I hated to admit it, his words stuck with me longer than I cared to admit. I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was right. As the plane started its descent, I could feel the tension in the cabin easing. People were starting to adjust their seats, preparing for landing, and the usual buzz of excitement before arrival filled the air. But then, the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm as ever. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our approach to Los Angeles. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for landing. We would also like to let you know that our guest of honor, Mr. Keanu Reeves, will be attending a charity gala upon arrival in honor of his significant contributions to various humanitarian causes." Wait, what? Guest of honor? Charity gala? It was like the words didn't quite register at first. My mind was still trying to process the calmness of this whole situation, the way Keanu had handled everything. But this was a game changer. I looked over at him, still sitting there, casually buckling his seatbelt, as if being named guest of honor at a charity gala was just another day for him. I felt a strange, heavy feeling settle in my chest. All the little clues were starting to make sense now. His kindness, his grace, his calm demeanor. He wasn't just some random guy who had stumbled into first class. This was Keanu Reeves, the actor, the philanthropist. He had been quietly living a life of generosity, helping people without seeking attention. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. All my assumptions, my judgments about him, everything I thought I knew, had been wrong. I wasn't just sitting next to a stranger who didn't belong in first class. I was sitting next to someone who had used his success to give back, someone who understood something I clearly didn't. And then, as if to confirm everything, the in-flight entertainment screen lit up with clips of Keanu at charity events, talking about the importance of helping those in need. The words humanitarian flashed across the screen, and suddenly, I felt small. Maybe the real lesson wasn't just about being nice. It was about using your position to make a difference. And I had a lot to learn. As soon as the captain finished announcing Keanu's charity involvement, I felt the shift in the cabin. People who had been minding their own business started whispering to each other, It was like the air had changed. You could sense the respect, the admiration growing as more passengers realized who was sitting in the seat next to me. I overheard a few conversations. Keanu Reeves? I had no idea he was such a philanthropist. He's been doing so much for the community. And then it hit me. All those little comments, the knowing glances, the looks of admiration from the other passengers, they were all directed at him. Keanu wasn't just some guy who got lucky in life. He was a globally beloved actor, a man who had spent years giving back in ways I could barely comprehend. And I had the nerve to insult him. I could feel the sting of humiliation crawling up my neck. It wasn't just that I had been rude. No, it was worse. I had insulted someone who, by all accounts, had earned his place in the world. Someone who could have easily ignored me, could have dismissed me with a snap of his fingers, but instead chose kindness, understanding, and grace. And the worst part? Everyone knew it now. I watched as some of the passengers glanced at me, no longer as a fellow traveler, but as the guy who had been rude to Keanu Reeves, of all people. I wasn't sure if they were judging me or if they were just surprised. But either way, I felt small. I could hear the whispers echoing in my head. I had been completely wrong about him. The more I thought about it, the more the weight of my actions pressed down on me. And then I realized the truth. The kindness Keanu showed me wasn't just an act of charity. It was a lesson. And now I had to live with the fact that I had been too blind, too proud, to see it when it mattered most. As the plane touched down, my mind was spinning. I felt this overwhelming urge to do something, anything, to undo the damage I had caused. I wasn't used to feeling this way, but there it was. I had been a jerk to Keanu, and it was eating away at me. I had no idea how I could make it right, but I knew I had to try. The cabin had quieted down as everyone gathered their things, preparing to disembark. I hesitated for a moment, trying to figure out what I was even going to say. Finally, I mustered up the courage and turned to him. Keanu was already gathering his stuff, ready to leave, completely unfazed by everything that had happened. I could feel my pulse quicken. This was my chance to apologize, to at least acknowledge the mess I'd made. "Keanu," I said, my voice a little shakier than I'd hoped. He turned, looking at me with those calm, kind eyes that had somehow kept their warmth despite my rudeness. "Look, I owe you an apology. I was out of line. I made assumptions, and I shouldn't have treated you that way." For a moment, there was silence. I braced myself for some kind of sharp remark or even a cold response. But instead, Keanu smiled. It wasn't a sarcastic smile or a get-over-it kind of smile. It was a genuine, understanding smile. "It's okay," he said, his voice soft but steady. "We all have bad days. Take care of yourself." That was it. No judgment, no harsh words, just that simple acknowledgement. And suddenly, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. He didn't just accept my apology. He showed me how to let go of the anger, how to move past it. As I walked off the plane, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was one of those moments that changes you. I started to think about my values, my assumptions about people, and how quickly I had judged someone based on their appearance. Keanu had been nothing but kind to me, and I had a lot to learn from that. The whole experience had left me introspective, questioning everything I thought I knew about success, humility, and how we treat each other.